good day for you so far?
Excellent day.
I'm glad to hear that. For me, it's an extra excellent day because I get to speak to you, and the book just came to me in the mail. And this is the biggest
Oh,
book I've gotten all year. Like, did you know that it was physically going to be the biggest book anyone was getting?
no, I didn't know, it's like, I'm glad. I'm glad everyone's so happy with it. I'm very happy with it.
Absolutely. It's very impressive that not only is it so well put together, but you got Rob Halford for the foreword, you got Eddie Trunk for the afterword. When in the process of making this book did you realize that you were going to get those folks on board?
Well, Rob did a great interview a couple of years ago, and then I read it, and I was like, wow, this sounds like it should be a forward. And so I said, can you turn this into a forward? I asked him, and he's like, yeah, but let me, and I pulled out what I liked out of it. And he said, let me take that and add a little stuff to it. So he took what he already, transcribed, whatever I transcribed, I sent to him. And then he took that and then he added some things to it to make it a nice forward. And the Eddie Trunk was like, the book was done. I had a week to turn in every final thing, and I still didn't have an afterword. So I was thinking, like, who should I ask? Who should I ask? This is New Year's Day Eve. And I just I said, wait a minute, what about Eddie Trunk? He knows me better than anyone. He's from Jersey. I've known him for, 30 years. He was at the KISS show that I got arrested at. It was his first concert in 1977. And I just emailed him and I said, do you think you can do it? I didn't expect to hear back from him like right away. And like 5 minutes later, he sent me back an email saying it'd be an honor. And then I'm like, wow, that's great. And then like maybe 2 hours later, he sent it to me. Like, it's like, it was my best New Year's Eve present.
Wow. The title is a little misleading in the sense that the decade that rocked, you had footing as a photographer in the late 70s. I think Steven Tyler, that was 78 that happened.
Yeah.
So, 70s, 80s, of course, 90s, you still had success. 2000s, you had the Gwen Stefani album cover and all that. So you have pretty much been nonstop with all this. But when exactly did it turn into a career per se, or at least most of your career?
I would say I accepted that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Probably 1981 when I started doing the covers for Circus. That's when I said, okay, like, because my parents kept pushing me to go to college, and I tried it a couple times, but it just didn't work out. And then they kind of, when I started like showing them my, my tax records that I'm really making money with this, they kind of left me alone, and they saw that how much fun I was having, and, and they were always bragging to their friends, showing them my photo credit and all that. So, they accepted it at that point. And then, they've always been supportive, but, my father never went to college and he wanted me to go to college, but I really couldn't. I had no academic skills because of my motorcycle accident when I was 12, which I mentioned in the book. I can't really retain, memory. So I couldn't really do good in school unless it was like a hands-on vocational type thing. And with photography, it's pretty much, it's a feel thing. It's how you get along with people. And it's just, you push a button and you move some lights around. I don't think you don't need to remember like what's the capital of, Nebraska or whatever,
Well said. And of course you put in not your 10,000 hours, you put in your 100,000 hours to say the least. But it's kind of awesome in a right place, right time thing that it became your deal in 1981 and then Mental Health happens in 82 so that you were there at the forefront. The rules were not already written as to what hard rock photography is or should be.
Yeah, exactly. It was the perfect storm for me. It's like, good timing. Most of the bands that were successful in the 80s that are in the book, really, we were cut from the same cloth. Zeppelin, Aerosmith, KISS, and even earlier stuff like T-Rex and Bowie and things like that. So it's a mix of glam rock and rock and it turned out to be hard rock and heavy metal, or hair metal, whatever you want to call it. But it's hard rock and heavy metal, I like to call it. And just rock, And
yeah.
So I was just there when it was forming. I started working with this band, White Tiger, in '78. And when I got my first picture in Circus the same summer, and I started working with them as my, I guess you can call it like my guinea pigs. They gave me access. I gave them photos to use. They had a name for themselves, selling out huge venues, but just playing covers, Zeppelin, KISS, Aerosmith, all the bands that I liked. And then a couple of years later, we did a photo shoot, my first heavy metal studio photo shoot with a heavy metal band with the spandex and everything. And I just thought that was cool as hell. And then I just started becoming, getting access with Circus, doing assignments. Like one of my first assignments was '79 in Convention Hall in Asbury Park for Van Halen when the second album was released. And then it just snowballed, and I went with the flow, and took the ride with all these people. When John Bon Jovi was 18, I shot him when he was in a band called The Rest. And Mötley Crüe came out in '82. I shot him for Wii Magazine. And, these are all bands that when they were just starting out, Dokken, Wasp, all the bands, Rat, I got them right in the beginning. And we just grew together.
Jersey's come up a few times. You just mentioned with the early days in Asbury Park and all that, with how Eddie Trunk wrote the foreword and all that. You, of course, famously introduced Ozzy Osbourne and Zakk Wylde. You famously introduced Sebastian Bach to Skid Row. I almost think that had you grown up in Connecticut, you wouldn't be here today. It was just Jersey was the source of all this.
Yeah, rock and heavy metal got, I was just part of a lot of people's fate. Zach has the talent, Sebastian had the talent, but just this weird thing of being in the right place at the right time, and me being developing a relationship with Ozzy and Skid Row guys and Bon Jovi. Everything just fit together and it just got pieced together like a movie. And then to top it off, it's documented, and actually Rolling Stone's going to be releasing a video that's never before seen of Sebastian and Zach and Kevin Dubrow singing "Bang Your Head" with me on background vocals. It's going to be a video from my wedding in '87. This is before Zach ever recorded with Ozzy and before Sebastian even heard of Skid Row.
Wow. Okay. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And one of the reasons I wanted to interview you was, of course, hey, this guy is a Jewish rock photographer. When when you go through the histories in the music business, stereotypically, it's the record label executives, they were Jewish, and the lawyers were Jewish. In the case of hard rock, though, when you think about David Lee Roth and members of KISS, and I believe Joey Kramer from Aerosmith, etc., there's more Jews in hard rock than people kind of realize. Was it harder at the beginning being Jewish, getting your foot in the door?
No, not at all. There wasn't anything like that going on.
Got it. Glad to hear that you didn't have to deal with that in the late 70s, early 80s, to say the least. Who was the first rock star, though, that you realized was Jewish and you went, man, that's pretty cool?
I don't know. I never really even thought of religion as being any, like I never, but everyone was equal, black, white, Hispanic, religion. I never partake in anything. I did get bar mitzvahed. I ended up raising my kids Catholic, as my wife took more of an interest in religion. I thought it was important that the kids would be brought up with something to try to believe in, and it's up to them to decide if they did or didn't. We always went to our Jewish holidays on my side, because my father was religious and his side, so we always partook in those experiences. So without going to temple, they got a little taste of both. But I always wanted a Christmas tree growing up. You know what I mean? Like all the Jewish kids did. We didn't want those light the candle and get the one present a day. So I wanted my kids to have the best of both worlds.
Makes sense to me. And you mentioned Van Halen as being one of the first big bands that you shot. What was it like shooting Van Halen? I asked that because it sounds like an easy question per se, but you said on the second album, was it on Van Halen 2 that you shot in Asbury Park?
Yeah, I believe that was it, 1979. So that would have been the second album.
Yeah, so 79. Was the band divided into two camps like that even back then?
Not that I know. I wasn't aware of. I went backstage. First time I met Eddie and the band was just, a brief moment because I was shooting for Circus. They were letting me come backstage and take some photos and shoot the whole show. So, just a very quick, how do you do kind of thing. I had no idea what was going on at the time in their camps. Next time around when I started working with them, everyone was kind of like in their own little world. But in the beginning, I had no clue. Until you spend time shooting multiple dates with a band, you don't really get the inside, scoop on what's going on.
I can imagine they were easier to shoot in the sense that everyone had a big smile in that band and everyone was a showman in their own right. But were they one of the easier bands for you to shoot in general?
Pretty much. I mean, really, a lot of the 80s bands, they were all pretty easy to shoot, really, if you think about it. They all knew how to pose. They were all kind of like rock star fashion models. So, there's a handful that need a little more help and a little guidance. But for the most part, yeah. But, Van Halen, Poison, Mötley Crüe, those were like the ones that knew how to pose out of all of them. But they all took direction. Those are the ones that I didn't really have to tell what to do. They kind of fell into formation.
And then once Dave went solo, were you able to shoot both Van Halen and David Lee Roth, or was there a divide there as well? I ask this because you rarely get to hear stuff about Van Halen from people that know them, because them and AC/DC are kind of like the two vaulted bands at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, no, I always I was kind of like the girlfriend that they didn't tell about, because they use other photographers too. But I would go on the road and then with Ben, let's say Black Sabbath, I would shoot Black Sabbath and then I would shoot Ozzy. I wouldn't tell the other one about the other one, whether they knew, I don't know if they cared, but I'm sure they wouldn't want me to be talking about, I just got off the road with Black Sabbath, and it's not something you talk about. But I worked with both of them successfully throughout the decade with Van Halen too. Like when Van Halen came out, when David switched camps, or when David went solo, he hired me to shoot some solo shots. And actually, when he was in Van Halen, he wanted me to shoot solo photos before he even went solo. And I kind of had a feeling things were kind of taking a shift, and he liked me, like the way I got him placement in the magazine. So I remember coming into my, I think there's a gatefold in the book of him on a couch in my studio, and then shortly after that he went solo, and then when Sammy entered the picture on the other side, they hired me to do their photos, like for the Monsters of Rock tour. Did tour book, did several photo shoots with them. And again, I didn't tell them I just got off shooting David Lee Roth, but
Right, that makes a lot of sense. In some fields, you find that the people hang out with their competitors, or they don't even view other people in their field as competitors. Dentists might hang out with one another. In your case, did you or do you hang out with other photographers, or is it just this is work and then this is life outside of work?
Well, back then there was a creative competitive between a few of us. I mean, there was the three of us. It was me, it was Niels Lozauer on the West Coast, and it was Ross Halpin overseas in England. So we all had the same kind of access. The bands liked us all, and they made sure we weren't at the shows at the same time. And you know, yeah, I mean, like when I heard, you know, Mötley Crüe was doing a video in LA, I know that Neil's from LA, but I didn't care. I would go over there and try to get that video shoot, you know, stills, because you get a lot of good photos at video shoots, because a lot of hanging around and they're in hair and makeup. So I always wanted to try to do that. So I did a lot of stuff there. Neil really didn't step on my turf too much. He didn't come to New York much. Ross kind of bounced around, so he was always trying to get in there. And you know, when I couldn't get every gig, they would get ones that I wanted, and vice versa. I got the album covers pretty much, the big ones, so that was an upper hand I had on those guys. You know, so that's how it was back then, like anything else. But today we're all friends, and you know, there's no real competition, because we're all kind of archiving our material, and we're selling it to some magazines, but like mostly reissues and things. And we kind of want to stay on the same page competitively, price wise. There's no reason to, you know, one should get more than the other, unless it's a real exclusive photo. But back then there were so many magazines. If you shot Bon Jovi against a blue background and then a red background and an orange background, there were sales left and right. So we're all making money, like every time you shot them against a different background. So that's why there was the competition, you know, because we all wanted to sell the pictures to the magazines, because there's a lot of money to be made back then.
And as somebody who has to go through their archives every time there's a book like this, are there a lot of unreleased photos from you at this point? Is there a lot that we haven't seen as fans?
Yeah, that would be an understatement, actually. Yeah, I mean, this book is more about my shoots that kind of meant something to me, meant something to the artist, you know, from album covers or certain, you know, festivals like the US Festival or Live Aid or the PMRC hearings or the Moscow Peace Festival. So, Hearing Aid. So those are documented in there because they tell a story, and it's pretty much, it's a timeline also of the visual imagery, how it changed. So photo shoots were important on which years I would present each band, like just because I shot, you know, Dokken throughout the decade, I would really focus on the album cover shoot and not just throw a photo on. Now, when they played Monsters of Rock, I would put a photo in there because it was part of an event. You know, it was just real important shoots in this one. Now, the next book, I would like to do like a one shot on one of the bands, like Van Halen or Mötley or Bon Jovi or Ozzy, with permission. You know, not that I don't need permission, but I want involvement. So I'm going to reach out to them. I haven't really reached out yet. I will soon. That's what I would like to be the next book. And then if not that, I want to do a kind of a decade that rocked, BW, like black and white. And that I always shot black and white too. But I never processed the film when I was on the road. I just threw it in a box, you know, and then, you know, as the decade came to a close, I started processing it and do the negatives, not even contact sheets. So now I've been archiving those, and because the reason why I didn't do anything with them is because the magazines only paid like $25 for a black and white, and I wanted to shoot the band in color, but I couldn't really, you know, you can't shoot tons of film in color. It costs a lot of money, you know, process it. But black and white was cheaper. It's only a couple bucks a roll. You don't have to develop it right away. So I would shoot a lot of that, and a lot of that is from the tour buses, backstage, you know, pictures that weren't designed to go into the magazines, but great on the road stuff that people really want to see. And I have a lot of that. And so that I want to be that could be my next big book too.
That is so exciting to hear as a fan, that there's stuff from some of your favorite bands that you've never seen all these decades later. So I'm excited about that. Before I ask my last two questions, you said a magic series of words, and that is hearing aid. I keep finding so many people were inspired by hearing aid. Like, so many famous people love hearing aid. And at the time, I think it raised $1 million. It wasn't this colossal success the way that We Are the World was, or Do They Know It's Christmas was. But over time, it's kind of become an iconic thing. When did you realize that that session was great and people were going to be talking about it years later?
I kind of felt like it was when I did it. I just thought it was going to be something iconic. Yeah, the marketing wasn't great. I don't know the reason. It kind of fell through the cracks. You know, people didn't take heavy metal serious. They thought we were a bunch of, you know, destructive anarchists or, you know, causing trouble and whatnot. But really, it's the opposite. You know, most of these performers really have great hearts, and they always help out foundations and charities, and just they're, you know, they're showmen. And unfortunately, the mainstream media or people that are in higher places like the PMRC, the senators that try to put a label on that, you know, they just look for reasons not to make things, you know, good for us. And I think that might have something to do with it, that, you know, if we had more support with more of the mainstream press, and didn't just give accolades to, you know, We Are the World and things like that. And let's face it, I mean, out of, you know, suicides and drug overdoses and things like that, like the pop world probably has more, you know, issues and people that fell than hard rock and heavy metal.
I agree with you. That's a really good point. Well, hopefully there's eventually a hearing aid book or collection from you. But my last two questions for you, Mark, because you've been so kind with your time. First, what was the last concert, whether or not you shot it or just attended it, before COVID? Do you remember?
Honestly, I don't. It might have been Extreme at the Starland Ballroom. Possibly. The last event that I shot, I won't forget because it was really special, was when Ozzy released his last album. He had a you know, little party at the Rainbow, and he had a thing at the tattoo shops worldwide where they would have Ozzy inspired tattoos, and Ozzy showed up at a couple, and they wanted me to, you know, photograph it. And then me and Sharon, I asked Sharon if she would mind if I decorated the Rainbow with my photographs and with like canvas, and then we would have Ozzy sign them at the end, and, you know, we can, you know, send it for charity, you know, raise some money for charity. So we did that, and at the party, I hung up all my photographs, like huge canvas prints, and took photos, and, you know, hung out and had fun. And he did a book signing, not a book signing, a record signing at one of the stores, which was, you know, a huge line, as you could imagine. And that was it. So it was like the last taste of how things were back in the 80s, really. You know, you had the event, the party, the book sign, the record signing, and something special. Like back in the 80s, that's what we did. That's what everyone did. They put out an album. They went to the record store. They did a record release party at a club, and they did some function, things for the press. So it was kind of like a bittersweet moment. But I'm glad it could have been Ozzy, out of all the artists that, you know, with my relationship with them, that, you know, I have that memory to you know, remember.
That's great. And let's see, you know, how many people really have worked with the Osbournes for 40-ish years? I can't think of more than 3 besides you. So that speaks to the quality of your work and your being a great human being. So take the compliment. And last question for you, Mark. Any last words for the kids?
Well, yeah, for the kids. Well, kids that, you know, I like talking to kids, and I like to try to inspire them. When a photographer says, you know, they want to be a rock and roll photographer, I don't discourage them. I say there's no magazines to make money on, but if you love doing it, you know, do it. Start your own magazine. Go online and start your own blog, and find your own bands. Don't it doesn't have to be someone that's been around for 20, 30 years. Find new bands that have music that you like, and shoot the classic bands too, and you can throw them in there. And I also tell them to learn video, because bands on the road, they don't really hire just photographers to go on the road with them anymore, because there's no magazines, but they do need video people, so for social media and to get things out. It's a lot more work, but there's a lot more hats to be worn now when you're a rock photographer, when you're on the road with a band. And the pay is not as good as it used to be, because we used to make money from magazines, and once the bands don't like paying, and we didn't need them to pay us, because we were making money just like they were from the record companies, from the magazines, from the poster companies. So it was a nice relationship. And now it comes out of the band's pocket. They don't want to pay, so they're going to work you to death, and it's not going to be a lot of money. So, but you work yourself up to a name, and then you start doing portraits, and people hire you to do album covers. That's up to you. It's up to you to show what you can do and bring to the table.
Wow, really well said. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm so glad to hear that there's more books to come from you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mark. I'll tag you when all this is out and up. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, thanks a lot.
Paltrocast.